It's okay. You don't have to apologize. But you should probably go. Please.
But I just got here.
You belong down in Arendelle.
So do you.
No, Anna, I belong here. Alone. Where I can be who I am without hurting anybody.
Hola, comrades. Today's topic of interest, Frozen. On Wednesday, November the 27th, 2013, Disney's latest animated spectacular expanded into wide release. Reviews are almost universally positive, so box office analysts were confident it would be a major hit. Some thought it would be about as big as Tangled, meaning a $200 million US gross and a $600 million worldwide gross. Some thought it wouldn't be that big because the Snow Queen, the story Frozen was based on, was not as well known as Rapunzel, the story Tangled was based on. No one expected what would actually happen. From Wednesday to Sunday of its long Thanksgiving weekend opening, it grossed over $93 million in America, blowing past expectations, and it did not slow down. It captured the #1 spot at the box office the next weekend, slaying the behemoth that was The Hunger Games: Catching Fire, which would become the highest-grossing movie of the year in America, despite basically being a repeat of the first Hunger Games movie. That film may have made more money domestically in the long run, but Frozen captured the cultural zeitgeist. It was the highest-grossing film worldwide that year, and it became the only film of this century other than Avatar to top the box office in its 6th week of wide release in America. Its 5th and 6th weekends were the highest ever in America, behind only Avatar and Titanic. It managed to gross over $400 million domestic off its already surprising $67 million Friday through Sunday opening, a multiplier of over 5. That is insane. It became the 5th highest grossing film worldwide. But looking at all this esoteric box office stuff does not properly convey the film's cultural relevance. To get a better view of that, one need only look at all the Frozen-inspired YouTube videos that went viral in late 2013, and especially early 2014. From truly bizarre creations like a mashup video between this and Breaking Bad, to a storm of Let It Go covers that tried to top one another in bombast and creativity. It was a distinctive era for YouTube. Frozen became entrenched in popular culture. Kids, especially little girls, became as obsessed with it as they were with The Little Mermaid in the 1990s, except that this was somehow bigger than that. This was Disney's first world-conquering original animated hit since social media and video sharing completely revolutionized the internet. However, because it was so enormous, it soon became overexposed, and backlash set in. This was not a critical backlash or a fan backlash so much as it was a cultural backlash. It is the universal rule of art. If something becomes so popular that even people who aren't fans of it have to deal with it on a daily basis, there will be a major backlash. And the more popular it is, the larger the backlash. Comparisons were drawn between this backlash and the backlash to Titanic, another enormous, unapologetically emotional film that skewed largely younger and female. There was one major difference between these backlashes, which is that a significant part of Frozen's backlash was generated by exhausted parents who were tired of seeing their 4-year-old girl trying to sing Let It Go while tripping over her Elsa costume. But other than that, the two backlashes are remarkably similar. They both began to surpass the initial tide of acclaim around the time of the Academy Awards. They were both fueled by an exhaustion that soon progressed into rage. Both backlashes were also complex. They were the amalgamations of different sub-backlashes. For Titanic, there were people who hated that it was so unapologetically romantic, people who loved romance but thought the film was not a great romance movie, people who were Cameron fans and thought Titanic was inferior to other films of his, such as True Lies and Terminator 2, and there were people who did not hate the film, but wished other films released that year, such as LA Confidential, received more attention. For Frozen, there were people who genuinely hated the film, but there were also hardcore Disney fans who believed the film was inferior to Tangled and should not have received more attention than that film, as well as people who were only tired of Let It Go and did not mind the film as a whole. In the last several years, the backlash has died down. Frozen is still big, but it's no longer the pop culture behemoth it once was. So now, as we reach its 5-year anniversary, let's soberly and critically ask, was Frozen deserving of the acclaim it received upon release? Honestly, yes. Like Titanic, I can understand the backlash to Frozen, but I cannot in any way endorse it. Titanic is the best American film of the 1990s, and Frozen is the second best Disney animated film of all time, to The Lion King. They're both poignant, they're both well written, with surprisingly complicated and conflicted characters with surprisingly intricate character arcs. They both use the money available to blockbusters to heighten the emotional expressions of the characters, not detract from them. They both refuse to be subdued or subtle. They both have a raw openness to them that's not found in works directed at adults, but is not automatically bad and does not preclude nuance and depth, both of which these films have in spades. In their overblown rush, they find connection and catharsis. They're both heavily flawed, particularly in that they're a little too convoluted, and in that they fail to make characters outside the two most important characters feel like anything more than trite, one-dimensional cardboard cutouts. But in both films, the relationship between the two most important characters is strong enough that these flaws do not drag down the narrative. A lot of blockbuster films aren't great. I know that is not exactly a revelation, but let me offer evidence. Look at this. What you're looking at is a list of the 50 highest grossing films ever released worldwide, not adjusted for inflation. There are a lot of groundbreaking movies here, such as Titanic and Black Panther and The Last Jedi. These films dared to be bold. They dared to push against the tired, cynical blockbusters that came before them. But there's also a lot of forgettable junk that will be forgotten in 5 to 10 years, if it hasn't been forgotten already. There are multiple Transformers movies on that list. There are multiple Pirates of the Caribbean movies on that list. There's Minions. There's Despicable Me 3. There's that Jumanji remake that I didn't even know existed until I checked Box Office Mojo last January. Any blockbusters that are not either blandly obnoxious or obnoxiously bland are welcome, especially if they're original material, which Frozen basically is, bearing only a passing resemblance to the Snow Queen. People kept coming back for a variety of good reasons. The aesthetic is distinct and memorable and gorgeous. The characters are sympathetic and tender, but they're not vapid innocents like Snow White and Cinderella. They actually have weight to them, especially Elsa, who despite receiving significantly less screen time than her sister Anna, became the breakout character of the film. There are a lot more toy Elsas than toy Annas. The character has a great voice, but she also has real darkness to her. She's not a hero or a villain. She's simply a confused person with a repressive upbringing who's terrified of herself. She's the most ambiguous and compelling character in a Disney film. But the biggest reason why audiences kept returning to Frozen was the songs. The first and best third of the film soars, not only because it eloquently and lucidly illustrates both the love and the tension in the relationship between Elsa and Anna, but also because this depiction is propelled by songs that actively advance the characterization of the sisters instead of merely depicting it. They're very different songs, but the three best are staggeringly ambitious. Do You Want to Build a Snowman is an astonishing piece of filmmaking. It has to take us from the sisters' childhoods to their adulthoods, while depicting how far apart they've grown because Elsa's been locked away. Elsa, once warm and loving, becomes cold and isolated. Anna keeps asking her if she wants to build a snowman like when they were kids, but she receives no response. What's tragic about this is that Elsa does not want to shut Anna out, but she feels that she has no choice. In the last shots of the sequence, they're lying almost back to back. Their expressions are the same. They both want to see each other, but there's a door between them, representing the distance separating them. Just by itself, this could make for a devastating, haunting short film. The desperation is threaded through the structure of the song. Like all the other songs in the film, it employs a classic verse, chorus, verse structure, but whereas the other songs use this to reaffirm the major theme of the song, here it serves to convey Anna's steadily building desperation and suffering. This is a master class in how to use songwriting to further narrative. The second of these great songs, For the First Time in Forever, is more straightforward, but it's ebullient. It explores Anna's glee at finally getting to leave the castle, but it also hints at the naivete that her sheltered upbringing has given her, both of which are building blocks for her character. But what elevates this song is when Elsa's part sharply juxtaposes Anna's. The older sister voices concern and fear, providing a foil to Anna's jubilation. Not quite as good, but positively operatic, is the reprise at the end of the second third. It's the best song after the first third. It starts as a simple plea from Anna that devolves into chaos when Elsa expresses her apprehension. The two of them start singing over each other, and it's nothing less than glorious. Unlike in the original version of the song, the distance between them here is emotional rather than physical. But the best song in this film is Let It Go. If you can, listen to it with fresh ears. It's not as complex emotionally as Do You Want to Build a Snowman. It's one of the rawest and most powerful songs I've heard. The cinematography of the sequence helps a lot. The first shot of Elsa during this sequence is from far away. She can hardly be seen. She's a lonely figure on a lonely mountain. A forlorn piano riff plays. By the last shot, she's made the mountain her own, building an ice palace. She's facing the camera, confident and assured. The sun has risen, representing her newfound optimism. Throughout her journey, she discards symbols of her old life, from her tiara to her gloves, before making herself an ice dress. But the lyrics are where the song shines. They may be vague enough that anyone can apply them to whatever repression they're facing, but these lyrics are not platitudinous. They apply perfectly to Elsa's situation, tracing her journey from fear and loneliness to excitement and freedom to, finally, self-actualization. Calling this a self-empowerment anthem is a bit like calling Stairway to Heaven a rock song. Technically true, but also kind of demeaning. This charts a journey of self-discovery with pathos and compassion. I'm glad it became so pervasive. I'm glad it reached the Billboard year-end Hot 100. I'm glad it became a top 5 hit on the Hot 100, though it's too good for the pop charts. Most so-called self-empowerment anthems fail because they do not answer two questions. What do you need to seek empowerment from? And what are you now empowered to do? These questions don't have to be answered concretely, but they do have to be answered emotionally. Contemporary empowerment anthems like Rachel Platten's execrable Fight Song and Alessia Cara's condescending Scars to Your Beautiful fail because they do not offer satisfactory answers to these questions. But Let It Go does. It's a raging, howling, plaintive, mournful, ferocious monster of a song. Yes, it's a lot like Idina Menzel's other famous power ballad, Defying Gravity, but it's different enough that it is not a ripoff, and it's a better song. The narrative arc is more carefully sketched out, and I'll happily argue that the world is better off with two fantastic Idina Menzel power ballads. Even the other songs of that first third, like the opener, Frozen Heart, and the colorful Love is an Open Door, succeed at building ideas and themes, and in the case of the latter, a relationship. The songs actively advance the narrative. If you cut any of them, even Frozen Heart, the film would be lesser. It's remarkably tight and cohesive. The characters burst with life and angst and longing. It's one of the best first half hours of any film. Unfortunately, it can't quite keep up the energy. The second third lags a little, but it is the final third that stops it from being quite as good as The Lion King. This final third is not terrible, but it is rather flat. The tension is never as strong as the film wants it to be. The final 5 to 10 minutes are cathartic, but there's a lot of stolid setup to get through before that. I don't inherently mind the twist that Hans is a villain. A lot of people do, but I think it's just mediocre. I definitely don't think it's a bad idea, but throwing in a few more clues would help it be more believable. Or, here's a better idea. Completely rewrite the final third of the film. Excise all the unnecessary political conversations. This is not Game of Thrones. No, go further than that. Cut Hans. Cut the Duke of Wesselton. Keep Olaf. He's important because he symbolizes the close bond between Elsa and Anna when they were children. His existence offers hope that they can repair that bond, but reduce his screen time a little, cut a few of his worst jokes, cut his song, In Summer, which is an unnecessary distraction. Keep Kristoff, but change his relationship with Anna, have her dream of finding love in the arms of the stereotypical handsome prince, and have her not realize that she could fall in love with someone like Kristoff, who is gruff and uncouth, but who genuinely cares about her, until the end of the film. Drastically cut the trolls' screen time, including their song. They have to be at the beginning of the movie, but since Kristoff heard what they had to say, have him repeat their message about how her heart can only be thawed by love, and have this lead to her going back to Elsa with a new approach or strategy. Anna's naivete, an important part of her character, still matters even if she is not betrayed by Hans. She never expects Elsa to hurt her, and then Elsa freezes her heart. That's a crushing blow to her. Other than that, focus more directly on the relationship between the sisters. You don't need all these other machinations. Include a few more songs. Without In Summer and Fixer Upper, there are basically no songs past the 35-minute mark except the reprise of First Time in Forever. Give Elsa more screen time. Watching her reckon with how her fears and longings clash is the most interesting part of the film. Give one new song apiece to her and Anna. Elsa's could be about how she's feeling lonely in her ice palace, even despite no longer being forced to suppress her identity. Anna's could be about how betrayed she feels because she was wrong about Elsa never hurting her. And double down on the reprises. How about a reprise of Let It Go, where Elsa decides to return from the mountain? Or how about a darker reprise of Do You Want to Build a Snowman, but from Elsa's perspective after Anna has been frozen. Or hell, a reprise of Reindeers Are Better Than People when Kristoff believes he'll lose Anna. You could keep the ending of the film, but have soldiers who want her gone because they believe she's a threat, not because they've been ordered to take care of her by the Duke, threaten Elsa instead of having Hans threaten her. And to move the confrontation to inside her ice palace, which is slightly underused for such a gorgeous locale. There's no need to have her be captured in the ice palace, then saved out on the frozen fjords. All of these changes would not detract from the essence of the original film, rather they would build upon that essence, because that essence deserves to be built upon. That I can call without qualification. The relationship between the sisters, deep and despondent and desperate, is a testament to how the team behind this film were committed to telling a real story about isolation and reconciliation, when they could have easily crafted an empty wish fulfillment blockbuster. Frozen's accomplishments are outstanding not only for a Disney film, but for any big-budget tentpole. It was enough to convince a surly 14-year-old in early 2014 who hated Disney films to love it. That 14-year-old, of course, was me.
Love will thaw. Love. Of course. Elsa? Love.
Upon writing this, I quickly discovered that I could easily write 10,000 words about this film. I've had a long and a transformative relationship with it. I could probably write 10,000 words solely about my relationship with it. Sometimes I wonder if my love for this film is enhanced by how important it was for 8th grade me. It's the same question I have about the Lord of the Rings films, but it's hard to know. Try as one might to isolate their sentimental feelings from their critical capacities, the two are inextricable. This film changed me. It burst through my adolescent apathy and convinced me that bright colors and flashy musical numbers do not disqualify a film from being enthralling in terms of not only its visuals, but also its narrative and characters and its mature treatment of its themes. I actually was at a movie theater the first Saturday Frozen was released. That day was November the 30th, 2013, but I was not there to see Frozen. I was there to see Catching Fire. I was, and still am, a huge Hunger Games fan. I was surrounded by people there to see Frozen, including a little girl dressed up as Elsa. They annoyed me more than anything. All I had seen of Frozen were trailers featuring Olaf and Sven. I wanted to run as far away from Frozen as possible. Even when I started reading all the critical buzz, I was unwilling to buy into it. Standing there that last day of November, I had no idea that Frozen was going to become so enormous. Then again, neither did anyone who was there that day to see Frozen. Not until the backlash started setting in did I really start to be consumed by the film. I watched all the songs, I fell in love with Let It Go, I watched every unnecessary Let It Go cover I could find. I got the film on Blu-ray and watched it over Easter and adored it. I may not have loved the film as much as I did had I not been, like Elsa, at a crossroads in my life, but I would not have loved it had it not been smart and detailed in its craft, and deeply affecting in its narrative. Anyway, if you liked what you saw today, consider donating to my Patreon so I can produce even more mellifluous content. Also, don't forget to like, and comment, and subscribe, all that heartwarming stuff. Adios, comrades!